Hey guys, I recently released Console Experience, a set of worlds that were limited in size to match the Legacy Console Edition versions. I did mention that there was quite a process I went through to create those worlds, and I considered making a video on it, so I decided, why not just make a video explaining how to do it yourself, so now you can make any Console Experience world you want. Let's get right into it. Right off the bat, I'm just going to say this tutorial expects that you already understand how to install computer programs and use the file manager and zip files and most basic computer stuff. I'm not going to be going over installing all these programs. I'm not going to be going over the basics of copying and pasting. I'm assuming you know what you're doing. All of these programs are linked in the description under the required and recommended download sections. First off, there's MCA Selector, which is the world editor. You're going to be using this a whole lot. Download that exe and set it up. Then there's JE2BE, which is a world converter. You need this if you're going to be making the world for Bedrock Edition, but also you need it if you're going to be making a limited nether. That one's free on the Microsoft Store. Next, we'll need to install NBT Studio, which requires the .NET desktop runtime. Just follow that URL to install that, and then hit the nptstudio.exe file. This is going to let you edit level.dats outside of the game, which lets you change Bedrock Edition world stuff, like starting with a map, without opening the world. You'll also need to download the Console Experience tool zip that I linked in the description. This is the full set of data packs and a nether helper that I've created for the world. We're going to be using those later. Now, you don't need these next three, but I do recommend them. It's the Fabric mod loader, along with the Fabric API and Sodium. This is just to optimize your game so that the world generates a lot quicker. You don't want to be waiting around for chunks to generate, especially if you're trying to create a large world. It just takes a long time. Now it's time to create the world, but you have to make a few decisions. First off, what platform are you targeting? Is this Java or Bedrock? You're still going to create the world on Java no matter what, but do you want it to be for Bedrock or do you want this to be for Java? You also have to decide the size of world you want: large, medium, small, or classic. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to show how to make a small world for Bedrock first, and then we're going to do a classic world for Bedrock. So, in-game, after hitting the Create New World button, go to More World Options, pick whether you want the bonus chest or not, pick your world type. Do not import a data pack that adds custom biomes. If you add custom biomes to your game, like trying to do Terralith or something, the world converter will not work. It will delete all chunks that have custom biomes in it. So you cannot convert custom biome worlds, but you can convert worlds with custom terrain, like an amplified world will convert just fine. So pick your terrain type, and now open the data pack screen and hit Open Pack Folder. This is where you're going to put your data packs, which are selected for your world. Each size world has different data packs required. Extract the Console Experience tool zip and open the data packs folder to see the full list. If you're making a large world, the only one you need right now is Blaze Dust. If you're making a medium world, select Blaze Dust and medium biomes. If you're making a small world, select Blaze Dust and small biomes. If you're making a classic world, select Blaze Dust, small biomes, and classic nether. Anyway, pick the right selection for whatever world you're going to make here, and copy these to the folder that just opened in the other file explorer. Now go back to the game, and you should see your two data packs imported. Add those to the world, and hit Done. Now create your world. Now comes perhaps the most difficult part of the entire thing. You have to pick the right terrain for your world. Since these worlds are limited, you're going to want to make sure that your world has all the biomes and structures you want within the radius. This can be really difficult, especially when creating a classic world, but it's useful to keep in mind that the infinite oceans in all the other settings will provide infinite ocean monuments, ocean ruins, and cave biomes for you to explore, so those are not really a factor. What you need to be worried about is things like pillager outposts, woodland mansions, villages, things that make a large impact in your world and you want to have. Now, there's an easy way to check if what you want is inside of your radius. So what you do is you set /world border, set, and now for the large world, type 5120. For the medium world, type 3072. For the small world, type 1024. I'm going to use 1024 because that's the small world we're doing. And then type /world border, center, tilde. This is now pretending as if our world was centered right where we were standing, so we can see what fits within this radius. I recommend switching to spectator mode and using the mouse wheel to fly very quickly, because it can take forever to fly around if you don't do that. Keep in mind that the 2 edge chunks of your world before the world border are going to be deleted as well, so don't keep anything important in those ones. Picking the right world can be a big challenge, and this is one of the most time-consuming parts of the entire process, exploring a world to find the one section that you really want to turn into a permanent survival world. So here's what I recommend to help you. Find something really rare and start from there. So I'd like to start by locating a mushroom biome. If you don't have a mushroom biome, you're not going to be able to get any of those mushrooms in your world or mycelium ever. So that's probably the first thing you should consider when you're making a limited size world. If you start by centering the world border there, you can now check what terrain you have around you. The small biomes data pack should help more biomes fit into your radius, but it can still be quite difficult to find a truly good mix. This part is really up to you. Pick as much as you want in the radius, and do as much searching as you have time for, but ultimately know that you've got to pick something. Also keep in mind that there is a command we can use called /place. /place lets you put down structures wherever you want. So if you have a dark oak forest in the world but no mansion, no worries. Just put a mansion down manually with the command afterward. So structures are not as limiting as the world terrain. However, structures that you place with the place command will not spawn entities, like you can't place an ocean monument that will spawn guardians, and you can't place a pillager outpost that will spawn pillagers. Let's pretend that I am exceedingly happy with this world that you've just seen me generate in the background. Let's make this our permanent small world. So, here's what we're going to do. Exit the game, and just quit Minecraft entirely. Now open MCA Selector, which you just installed, because it's time for us to learn it. First off, hit File, Open, and navigate to your .minecraft folder. You can find tutorials on how to do this online. I'm going to assume you know how to do it already. And open your world. If you've been to the Nether, it will ask you if you want to open dim -1, dim 1, or the overworld. Just open the overworld. Now you can see a chunk view of all of the chunks of your world that you've explored so far. You need to make sure that every single chunk inside of your radius that you are exploring is filled. You can check this in one of 2 ways, but they unfortunately do require some math. You have to find where your world was centered, so ours was centered on that kind of mushroom biome area, so we're going to navigate over to there in MCA Selector, and now look in the bottom left where you can see the block counts, and go out 500 blocks in each direction from that. If you click, you'll actually select all the chunks in this line, and then go up so that it makes a big square around this area. In the end, your radius doesn't have to be perfect, this is just to check that all your chunks have been generated. If all your chunks have not been generated, go back, reopen the world, and generate those, because we are going to be moving these chunks, so they won't generate properly if you don't have them already complete. So now it's time to select the actual radius of our world. Unfortunately, you cannot make it match perfectly to whatever world border you selected in-game, because the real world is segmented into chunks, which means you can only pick the borders in 16-block increments. But you should be close enough to wherever you were anyway. Select a 64 by 64 chunk square. It's useful to know that if you zoom out a lot and see those bigger squares, those are regions. Each region is 32 chunks by 32 chunks. So if you select 4 regions in a square, you've just selected 4,096 chunks, which is a 64 by 64 area, which perfectly matches the small world size. Once your square of world is selected, hit Selection, and then press Invert, Selection, Delete Selected Chunks. This is going to delete everything except the part of your world that you actually want to have when you turn it into a small world. Now it's time for the actual math. Now we should center the world so that the chunks actually align with maps and the coordinate scale in a nice way. First, you have to locate the center piece of your map, which is more difficult than it sounds. You have to go out halfway through your world to the right and halfway up. So the small world is 64 chunks by 64 chunks. So we will do a 32 chunks to the middle and 32 chunks up. Perfect. This 30-second selection piece is one of the 4 center chunks. If we select the full center, it is actually this area. So this intersection of 4 chunks right here is the true middle of the world. Let's deselect the rest of this by holding the right mouse button. And now we are left with the 4 center chunks in the world. Deselect all of them except the top right. And this is the chunk that we're actually going to use to position ourselves. The world is now currently in the position of 29, -94. Where we need the center chunk to be is all the way down here at chunk 0, 1. We need to find a vector that would bring that world down to this chunk, which is easier than it sounds. This chunk is 0, -1, right? And this is 29, -94. So to bring 29 to 0, you just put -29, and then to bring -94 down to -1, we're going to add 93. So now our chunk change is going to be 29, 93. Select your whole world, which you can do very quickly by hitting Tools, Filter Chunks, change the inhabited time to Status, Full, and now hit Selection, Export Selected Chunks, and pick a location where you want to save those chunks. Put them in their own little folder because it creates a lot of files. Now hit Tools, Import Chunks, find your folder. It should have an Entities, a Point of Interest, and a Region folder. Hit Select Folder, and now in the Offset section, we are going to put those numbers that we found previously, -29, 93. So now our world is actually centered on 0, 0. This is fine if you want to keep it like this, but I like to do another extra step so that it actually aligns with maps properly. And to do that, we're going to have to move it by an additional vector, which is predetermined, luckily. You don't have to do any math for this one. This vector is always going to be 28, -36. Export your chunks once again from the center of the world. We're going to call this one Centered World, and now import the chunks with that predetermined offset, 28, -36. Now I know it looks kind of ugly, but this world will fit perfectly onto a 1x1 map, exactly how Legacy Console Edition does it. Select your world area once again. You can't use the filter this time because there are more full chunks than just this area, so just do a square selection, and then hit Selection, Invert, Selection, Delete Selected Chunks. Boom. Now we have a map-centered world all ready to go. We have one less thing to do though. Tools, Filter Chunks, Full. Hit Tools, Change Fields, and we're going to set Force Blend to True. This is an important step because this is how the world is going to blend its chunks. Now the very last thing we're going to do is delete the outside 2 layers of this world. This part can be a little annoying to select, but just bear with yourself. Select those chunks, and once you have this selected very nicely, hit Selection, Export Selection as .csv, and save that as Blend Border. Now, delete those chunks as well. Okay, now we are ready to actually blend the world with an ocean, which is how our world is going to be smooth and nice and fun to play on and immersive. At this point, we're going to be doing a whole lot of accessing the world folder, so it would be in your best interest to pin it to quick access. Now open the world folder once again, and open a second file explorer. Now this second file explorer should be used to navigate to where you saved all your chunks, and where you saved your tools. Keep all that stuff in the same folder. I'm just using my downloads folder as a big trash folder so that we can delete all this later when we're done. Open the data packs from the Console Experience Tools zip, then open the data packs folder in your world folder. Now copy the Oceans Only data pack into the data packs folder of your world. Now in Minecraft, we're going to load up our world real quickly. I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can actually see what's going on. It will warn you about experimental settings every single time you load up this world, but don't worry, because this is not experimental. This is the world generation technology used in a pretty vanilla way. When you do load up your world, you're probably going to be in an ocean because if you remember, we actually moved the chunks quite far away from the center, or rather we were at the center of our world and then we moved the world away from us. So let's recenter the world border back at our correct location, which is now 448.0, -576.0. Perfect. Now we can see the actual zone of our world shifted to the right area. Since we deleted those 2 edge chunks, we're going to have some very ugly blending at the moment, but don't worry, this is only temporary and we will be deleting these edge chunks once again so that the world can blend properly. The main thing you need to do right now is fly around the whole world border of your world and just generate the ocean that will be on the other side. That's the main goal of what we're doing right now. Don't even worry about how ugly this shore looks because it won't be here in just a few minutes. Once you have flown around your whole world at least one time, just exit the game and go back to MCA Selector. Within MCA Selector, hit F5 to reload your chunks, and now you can see how your world looks surrounded by oceans. But we're still not done here. Click Selection, Import Selection from .csv, and re-import blend border. Now, delete these chunks once again. Now you should see this weird black border around the center of your world that was actually real chunks before it goes into ocean. These chunks are what is going to smoothly blend us into the new world. So, now we have to do Tools and Filter for full chunks. Now for all of these full chunks, we need to change the fields of Force Blend to True once again. Perfect. Now we're going to change some data packs around. Leave Oceans Only on the world, but you need to copy Blend Mode next to it in the data packs folder. Now load up the world once again. Now, as you can see, this world border has blended much more smoothly. There are actually trees and vegetation on it. The ocean now matches the correct layer, even though it is a very abrupt transition in some places, like here. That is kind of how it was on Legacy consoles, so at least it's very accurate. It doesn't always look perfect. For example, you do still get very sheer cliffs sometimes, like this area, but it works in most places very, very smoothly, like this edge here. You will notice that there are some abrupt cuts around the chunks where it goes from the original world to the new border, because this tree has been chopped off viciously. And there's unfortunately no easy way to fix that other than manually flying around the world and punching all the trees down that were messed up. I did that manually for all the console experience worlds, and there is no real quick fix for that. If you're comfortable with the border as it is right now, don't even bother. Fly around your world border once again to generate these new properly blended chunks, and then we'll continue. Our world border is now nice and smooth, so we need to exit the world once again and delete the blend mode data pack. Let's reopen MCA selector to check and make sure that no new chunks have been generated with blend mode enabled. See, sometimes you get this sort of thing, where the terrain comes back because we enabled blend mode for a short amount of time. So, we're just going to do a little deletion again of the oceans and regenerate them. We're going to simply select your world. You can select a big radius, it doesn't have to be very precise. Just make sure not to include the new terrain that is past the edge, because you don't want that in your world. Now that our world is properly selected, we're going to invert once again and delete the chunks. Beautiful! Now if we load up the world, we will see that everything is properly connected past the world border to the point where there is no terrain ever. This world is now infinitely oceans past the edge that you have defined. At this point, if you want, you can set the world border back to normal, which is a very high number. It is 5999968. Don't even know what that is, but it is the maximum world border of the world, and now you have a smooth ocean transition into infinite oceans in your Console Edition-like world. Since I did say the world now fits properly on a map, I should probably explain what I mean by that. Let's get out a cartography table, 3 pieces of paper, and an empty map. Open this map anywhere inside the radius of the world, and now place it in the cartography table, along with the paper, and scale this up for all 3 papers. This new map is exactly the size of your world. If you walk to the edge, you'll see that it gets to the ocean and then stops. And this works for every single edge. Let's fly quickly over to this northwest corner of the world so I can show you that we are now at the top left corner of the map. This is why we did all that alignment stuff, so the world fits properly within its area. At this point, we have to check that some of the essential features of a world are actually here. So let's exit once again and go back to MCA selector to filter for certain chunks. Refresh so that it loads all the new chunks you just generated, and filter for a stronghold. You're going to set to structures and stronghold. This will highlight all chunks that have a stronghold in them. As you can see, there is no stronghold within our world border. So that means that if this was a classic world, you could never go to the end. This is something that you can actually easily fix with the place command, once again, our savior. It doesn't really matter where you place the stronghold, but I like to place it under a village like how it generates on Bedrock Edition. You can also put it anywhere else, but this is fine too. So just fly in spectator mode beneath the village and hit /place, structure, stronghold. And now we will see a stronghold has been generated in the world as if the world was natural. Sometimes you get some weird stuff in caves, but this is how strongholds do naturally generate sometimes, so it's alright. And thankfully, if you're a classic world, you can now go to the end as normal. But we are one dimension ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about the Nether now. Now, before I go through the whole process of creating a Nether for yourself from scratch, I do have to give a massive disclaimer here. Making a nether is way harder than making an overworld. And there is already 3 completed nethers, one for each size of the world, available from the original console experience worlds that I released. I really recommend that you just download the world, extract it to a current directory, and then copy dim-1 into your own world, and replace the files in the destination. This will give you the entire nether process complete with everything important inside the radius. Because there are 3 important things that every nether, I believe, has to have. 1, all 5 biomes, so that you can get all the resources, all the types of things. It would suck if you couldn't get warped wood ever because you just missed out on that biome. Number 2, a nether fortress with a blaze spawner. Number 3, you would want a treasure bastion with magma cube spawners. If you find a nether with all these 3 things, good job, you struck gold. The formula for a nether size looks like this. You're taking the world size, add 2048, divide by 8, and that's the size of the nether. So, the nether size for the large world is 896, the nether size for the medium world is 640, and the nether size for the small and classic worlds are 384. So finding everything you could ever need in a nether in 384 block radius is going to be difficult, which is why I say just copy the one I already did and don't worry about it. But if you do want to do it yourself, here's how. Let's go and set a random world border somewhere just to check out what kind of stuff we get. The unfortunate thing about the nether is since it is scaled to 8 times the size of the overworld, or rather 1/8 the size, because traveling 1 block in the nether travels 8 blocks in the overworld, when you're setting the world border, you have to set it to 8 times the numbers that you see on screen. So our world border is not going to be centered at 183. It is going to be centered at about 1700, negative 6400. That will put our world border center right about where we are. And yes, we are now within the tiny, tiny world border that we've set. So in this random section of nether that I just decided to check out, we've got a soul sand valley, a basalt deltas, some nether wastes. Do we have a bastion? Kinda. We have part of it. We got the magma cube spawner at least. Just barely. We could always move the border over by a few blocks to get the rest of it. Did we get a fortress? Doesn't look like it. Did we get a crimson forest or a warped forest? Also doesn't look like it. So this... Oh, wait. We did get a crimson forest. No warped forest, though. So this is a pretty good nether, but it's lacking a nether fortress. So we've got to look somewhere else. Assuming that this is a perfect nether, and we're not going to bother doing that because you understand the process would take quite a while, let's move on to the next step. We've got to center this nether just like we centered the overworld. Once again, open MCA selector, navigate to your world. The world I just used as an example was not the same world I was using before, which doesn't really matter because we're going to be deleting all the nether and importing our own chunks anyway. Once you select your world folder, select dim-1 because that is the nether. When you first load up your world, you are going to see something that is just the top of the nether and a bunch of mushrooms on top of it, because that's all you can normally see. So you'll have to change this number here to around 90 or 80 to actually see inside the nether. Here we go. This is a much better view, because now we can see the stuff around here. So this is the bastion that was about at the north end of our nether before. Here's the soul sand valley. Here's our basalt deltas. There's our crimson forest. So this is the area roughly where we were before. Using MCA selector, let's pencil in the actual borders for our area. So we have to divide the size of our nether by 16 to get the number of chunks. 384 divided by 16 is 24, so our nether is going to be 24 chunks by 24 chunks. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing any easy way to fit another fortress in here because there's no nearby fortresses to this bastion, but this is just an example. So we'll put this bastion in the top right corner, then we'll go down 24 until it says we have selected 24 chunks at the bottom. Now we'll go left until it says we have selected 47 chunks. There we go. This is now a perfect square nether, so we're going to connect these 2 corners. And this is the nether that we're going to be stuck with forever. So invert your selection, delete the selected chunks, and now it's time to center this baby. Like before, we're going to have to find the center of this, so we have to go halfway in, which is 12 chunks. So we're going to go 12 chunks in. And now we're going to go 12 chunks up, so the final number of selected at the bottom will be 23. Now these 4 chunks are the center area. Let's deselect everything else. And now we have to do our little math. So this chunk is currently at coordinate 6, negative 53, and we need to get it to 0, negative 1. So that change would be negative 6, 52. Let's export our nether now. And now let's re-import it with that offset applied. This nether is now perfectly centered on 0, 0. But If you remember, we made a little adjustment to our world after we centered it because we wanted maps to align properly, so we have to adjust the nether now to line up with it too. Just like the overworld, the nether is shifted by a predetermined vector, and that vector is 3, -4. Export your centered nether once again, re-import the nether with our predetermined vector, and now delete all the other chunks by selecting the nether, inverting, and deleting. There we go! This nether is now perfectly centered for our small world. But centering the nether is only half the battle. What we need now is a wall to stop players from exiting our limited nether area. We also need to make the nether outside of this box void instead of nether so that it doesn't take up the spawn cap. To make the outer nether void, we're going to have to add a data pack. For now, just add not a nether void to the world. We will change this to wastes later if your world is for Bedrock Edition, because the void converts to plains on Bedrock Edition, and we don't want you to have a bunch of plains biomes around your nether. Now let's load up the world once again with our not a nether data pack applied. Once again, you may have to reset the world border because it will be all messed up once you move your nether, but here we are. We have a nether, and once you go past the edge of the nether, there's not more nether, there's just nothing. If you check the biome, it'll actually say the void instead of nether wastes, which is what we want, because on Bedrock Edition this will make it much easier to do what we're doing next. But Bedrock Edition, you say, why would we be converting to Bedrock Edition now? What we're going to be doing is using structure blocks to build the bedrock wall around the nether. However, on Java Edition, structure blocks are limited to 48 by 48 by 48 block selections, and on Bedrock they can go up to 64 by 64 by 128, which is going to make our job of building the nether wall go a lot quicker. First, though, we just have to make sure to generate the little bit of void all the way around the nether so that we have extra space to fly around on Bedrock. Once you've flown all the way around the nether, exit the game and open up JE to BE, because it's time to use our second program. Now we're going to select the Java to Bedrock option and find where the world is. It may be in that list right there, but mine are stored in a weird place, so I have to do the file manager. Select your world and hit start. JE2BE will convert your entire Java world over to the Bedrock world format. I'll export this as an MC World file straight into my downloads folder. Let's hit show and explore so we can get right there, and now we'll open it. So now we are headed over to Bedrock Edition. Here's our world. It's not going to have an icon. The world will take a little longer to load than usual because it has to generate some extra files that the converter doesn't provide. And now, here we are. Do you remember why I said if you're converting to Bedrock we're going to use not another void instead of not another waste? Because of this. The fog becomes white and you can see infinitely in the nether if you don't use wastes. For this step, however, it doesn't matter because we're just going to be converting this world back to Java. So don't even worry yet. Now head into creative mode and get yourself a structure block. You'll also want to get yourself a redstone block and some bedrock. Now it's time to make our schematic of the wall that's going to fill our entire nether. First we'll need to be able to see coordinates, so we'll turn on show coordinates. And now we get to fill a huge wall. So it looks like we're on the x-axis right now. So we'll fill from tilde 0 tilde to tilde 65 127 tilde bedrock. There we go. Gigantic bedrock wall that goes from the bottom of the world to the top. Just try to place a block at the top and bottom to make sure that you got the full range. Looks like we did. So now we can place a structure block right next to this baby and adjust the structure bounds to be maximum. Set the X to size 64, the Y to 128, and the Z to 1. Perfect. Now we have a gigantic slab with a tiny little structure block at the bottom, so we're going to have to add an X offset of 1. There we go. Now we have a gigantic slab of bedrock in the maximum structure space. We're going to name this bedrock. And save. Boom. We're going to use pick block to pick this exact structure block. Throw this one away, hold down the control button, and middle click on this guy to get a new structure block with this structure already in it. Now place 3 more next to it like this. Now change the mode of each structure block to load. Now each one needs to have a descending integrity level. The one you started with should stay at 100. The one right next to 100 should be 75. The one past 75 should be 50. And our last one is 25. Now throw out your structure block again and pick block these in this order. 25, 50, 75, 100. Now break them away, build out a few blocks from your wall, and place them again in order. 25, 50, 75, 100. Check them to give it a little look. 100, 75, 50, 25. Perfect! Now throw a redstone block next to each of them, and we have just built ourselves a gigantic section of nether wall. If you haven't guessed, we're going to be using this exact same technique all along the side of the nether to build the rest of the wall. At the very edge right here, start by placing the blocks on the end like this. Make sure that they are in the correct area, and they actually are inside the nether boundary, because this is a chunk border, and if you have blocks outside of it, they're not coming over to Java. Activate them all, and boom! We have our first section of the Great Bedrock Wall. Now we're going to repeat this process. Come to where the bedrock wall ends, break 4 blocks, place the structure blocks in order, being careful to keep them in order, break the 4 blocks next to them, and place redstone blocks. Repeat this process all the way down the side. Here's our last one, so let's do it one more time. And there we are. We have now built all the way through the nether to have this gigantic wall on whatever side this is. Now, of course, that is one of 4. There are still 4 walls to this nether that are yet unbuilt, but you use a similar process for all 4 of them. You can actually reuse these exact same structure blocks on the opposite side if you start at the opposite corner so that they still build in the correct direction. Just make sure you always place the structure blocks in the order of lowest integrity to highest integrity so that the wall at the edge is full and the wall at the start is very spotty. I am not going to repeat this process 4 times just for this video because I did it enough times when making the console experience worlds, but you'll have to trust me that that is a very doable process that you can repeat 4 times. Once you're done, head back to JE to BE and we're going to convert this world back to Java. You can close Bedrock now. Once you're in JE to BE, hit Bedrock to Java, select the world that you just used, which we used small. You can even see the thing we were just looking at in the icon. Do not convert your player ID, and hit Start. Alright, we are almost done here. Save it into a custom folder, somewhere where you've saved all your other world chunks, because we are not going to be replacing our existing worlds with this. You can now close JE to BE. So here's the result. It is a world called Conversion, and it only has a few folders, but it is in the Java Edition format, which is all that matters. Open a new instance of MCA Selector, and open your converted world's nether. Here we can see our world from Bedrock Edition that we just converted over. You can even see that giant wall we put in the void. Now there's only a certain amount of blocks that we actually have to select to get this border transported over to our normal world. As you can see, the bedrock wall is visible in the chunk view, and if you do it properly all the way around the world, you will see that wall continue around all 4 edges. So all you actually have to do for this part is select the edges of the nether, export this small border layer as nether edge, and now you're done with the converted world. You can delete it if you want. That's all you needed was those edge chunks. To put them back in our normal world, we're going to open our original world folder, which should still be pinned to quick access, select the nether, and import those chunks. Make sure to have overwrite existing chunks checked. And now if we adjust this height viewer, you can see that we have our nether wall installed with our Java nether. So this process is quite time consuming, especially if you do it around all 4 corners of the nether, and especially if you're doing a large world. The bedrock conversion does help the process go much more quickly. And now, you have created your own nether from scratch. So the nether and overworld are finished. What's left? Just a bunch of minor stuff now, really. Load up the world on Java once again, and we'll go through all the little minor changes you can make to give yourself a better experience. Since we moved all those chunks around, your world spawn is going to be screwed right now. You'd spawn in the middle of the ocean, so you need to pick a new world spawn point. I like to pick somewhere near the middle of the world, usually a plains biome or a forest, or just somewhere with nice stuff around. Like, personally, this little island looks just about perfect to me. Sure, you're way too close to a mushroom biome compared to a normal game, but that's basically every Legacy Console Edition world anyway. Just set a new world spawn point wherever you want. Next, it's time to review structures. So you think you have everything you want in this world. Have you placed a mansion? We placed a mansion at the start of this video, so luckily we're already covered in that department, but if you haven't, now's the time. You should also consider placing some buried treasure around. You can use MCA Selector to search for buried treasure. If you open your world and filter for chunks with a buried treasure structure, you can find out if there's any buried treasure in your world at all. And it looks like there's none in ours, which would be a big problem because now we can never make a conduit. So, consider just flying around your beaches and placing some buried treasure. Buried treasure is considered a structure for some reason, not a feature. You should also make sure to place a stronghold, of course, though we did that earlier. And if you don't have an ancient city, well, placing one's going to be a little bit difficult because placing ancient cities does not mine out the ground around you, but if you have a large cave somewhere underground, definitely consider placing an ancient city in it. We'll try placing it in here and I'll show you what I mean. As you can see, the ancient city is kind of in here, but it's also in the walls, so you gotta do a lot of excavation yourself. But maybe it's worth it to you, I don't know. Now, I'll do a quick detour for Java Edition players who want to finalize their world, because we're just about done if you play on Java. For now, Java Edition players should follow this part of the tutorial. Bedrock Edition players, stay tuned. Java players, come to your world folder, select the Advancements, Data, Player Data, and Stats folders, and delete them. Just delete them completely, you don't need them. Also, open the level.dat using NBT Studio, and we're going to change a few things in here. First off, change the time to 0, change the daytime to 0. You can change was modded to 0 if you're still using just Sodium, because, once again, it's just an optimization mod, it doesn't change the game. And if you plan to use this as a survival world, definitely change game type to 0. Save once you're finished. And now there's one other thing we're left here to do. See this player entry? Click on him, and delete. We don't need that. That will reset all your player play history. So now when you start the world, it's like you're starting from scratch. Good job, everybody. You made a console experience world for Java Edition. Woohoo! But now Bedrock players, what are you supposed to do? Well, we gotta start preparing for the conversion. On Bedrock, we won't have the luxury of data packs to make infinite oceans for us, so we have to pre-generate them on Java Edition before we head over to Bedrock. Here's what I like to do for oceans. See these 2 regions outside of the main area? That's what the Nether is scaled for. Teleporting to the Nether from anywhere within this radius will keep you inside the Bedrock wall. So, my recommendation is to generate the oceans all the way out for these 2 regions. This takes quite a while, because you're just going to be flying around the ocean, staring at nothing in particular, discovering how boring it is to watch the Minecraft world generate when it's just oceans. The result of this, though, should be a very clean, square look. Now, for the generation process, set your world border to 2048 plus your world size, so for us it's going to be 3072, and keep the center where it was. Now we're going to fly out until we see the world border. This is the edge of the world that we need to generate. So now if we quickly hop over to MCA Selector and refresh, you'll see that a big long line has been drawn all the way out to where we were planning to go. Perfect! Now we just need to do that all the way around. This does quite bloat up the file size, but believe me, it's worth it to have the oceans on Bedrock. Sometimes your Minecraft world will become very laggy for absolutely no visible reason. After generating a lot of chunks, Minecraft sometimes struggles, so it's really easy just to exit the game, let it save your world, let it clear itself out, and then go back in. If when you're flying around the oceans you see an occasional barren patch, don't worry, it's not actually barren, it's just a dripstone caves biome that generated on the surface for some reason. Yeah, the oceans only data pack isn't perfect, but it results in some pretty cool ocean generation that you wouldn't get otherwise, and honestly, I think this is an improvement. You also occasionally get these massive exposed caves that look really awesome, so exploring these oceans by itself can be pretty fun. Like, I mean, look at this crazy ocean. This is practically a new biome. It's like a great spiky field. Now that we've made a full circuit, let's go back to MCA Selector and check it out. MCA Selector will not refresh regions unless you close and reopen the program, or you can do this weird thing, just pick a random region way out in the middle of nowhere and delete it. For whatever reason, that gets the program to finally reload everything. Refresh to get the rest of the area explored, and now you can see we've explored quite a lot of this world already. This is the region that we want to be completely full, so that our world can be generated and transferred to Bedrock with oceans. So really all we have to do now is make another loop through the middle of each region to fill those in. This part goes quickest if you have 32 chunk render distance. As you can see, my game has started randomly hitching. This is when it's a really good idea to exit the game and let it clean itself up a little bit. Occasionally, if you push Minecraft too far, you may encounter a situation like the one I am currently stuck in, where your game seems to be eternally saving your world. This is unfortunate, and it can cause world corruption, so be careful playing the game too much after it starts hitching. Like if we refresh an MCA Selector, it looks like we did get the entire world here. It's just, Minecraft is being a little scary. So it might be best if we just close it now. You may have to use Task Manager, which is Control-Shift-Escape, to pull it up and actually force it to close. Now let's load up our world one last time to pray that there has been no world corruption. But if you're looking at our little map here on MCA Selector, we explored the entire ocean, and we've got some extra chunks around. Now if you're very particular like me, you can actually delete all these extra ocean chunks. Frankly, there's not really much reason to. It'll probably convert to Bedrock more nicely if it's got jagged chunks instead of like very straight ones where it's obvious where the world ends. So leave all the chunks you want, it doesn't really matter when you're converting to Bedrock. Just know that you won't have a world border on Bedrock, so you are going to be able to explore these oceans to their full extent. So our overworld is now ready for Bedrock transfer, but that leaves the Nether. Let's open up the nether of our world so I can explain what we're going to do next. At this point, we are going to export our nether chunks and then insert them into the gigantic nether void that came with console experience tools. This will ensure that when we convert to bedrock, no nether will generate for thousands of blocks around the main area. First, select the main area of your nether and export the chunks. Now deselect everything and import chunks. Navigate to your console experience tools extracted. For me, it's just the exact same folder where we've been doing everything. And open Nether Wastes Void. This is a gigantic void which is going to replace the entire existing nether. This is why we exported the main nether previously. Now you can see our nether is reduced to a gigantic void where there is absolutely nothing except nether wastes. Re-import your nether now. No offset is necessary. So now we have our little nether with its wall, and it is in a gigantic void of absolutely nothing. So the nether is now ready to convert as well. At this point, you can close MCA Selector because we're actually done with it, finally. But we're still not quite ready to convert to Bedrock Edition. Go to your world and open the level.dat with NB2 Studio. Now we have to fix a few flags before we convert to Bedrock. For starters, if you want this world to be survival, change allow commands to 0. Change game type to 0. Change time to 0. Change was modded to 0. Open the Dragon Fight sub-tab and set Dragon Killed to 0, and Previously Killed to 0. Delete the player entries, and set Daytime to 0. Now save the file and close it. Now we are just about ready to convert our world, so you can close Java Edition, and go back to your world folder, and now we're going to delete a few folders. Select Advancements, Data, Player Data, and Stats. Now delete all of these. Congratulations! You are now ready to convert your world over to Bedrock Edition. Open up JE to BE once again, select Java to Bedrock, and open your world folder. Hit Start, and it may take a little longer to convert this time because we're also converting all of those ocean chunks, but don't worry, it will be a smooth conversion. Once the conversion finishes, save your world into a custom folder. Click Show in Explorer when you're done, and now you can see where you saved your world. You can close JE to BE at this point. Create a new file in here as a text document and rename it to levelname.txt. Open the file and put in the name of your world. We're just going to call this one Small World. Now open the level.dat. We're going to make a few more changes in here to fix everything up for Bedrock Edition. Stentor maps to origin, set that to 0. If you're on a classic world, set the nether scale to 3. Our world is just small, so we'll leave it at 8. Change the random tick speed to 1. 1 is equivalent on Bedrock to a random tick speed of 3 on Java. Change Start with Map enabled to 1. That will give you a map when new players join the game, like on Console Edition. Finally, add a new byte by clicking on level.dat and clicking byte, Show Border Effect, all lowercase, no spaces. Set that to 0. Now save, and you are finished. Select all the files in your world folder, right-click, and add to a zip file. Now rename this zip to a .mcworld type, and you can open this in Bedrock Edition to import your world. Now that we've imported our world, you'll see that the file size is probably larger than you expected. That's okay, because as you play this world, Minecraft Bedrock will actually compress the files so the world size will get smaller as you play more. Let's load it up to try it out. If we did everything correctly, we should load in as a completely new player with a starting map in the area where we set our world spawn. And here we are, perfect, just like I said. We're on that one weird little island that I chose. We've got our starting map that if we open, we will be centered within the world on, and we can see the world is loading around us. Let's head into creative mode here by enabling cheats, because yes, the process we went through did just give us a world that is achievement compatible. And now let's check out how the world converted. Looks like all the biomes converted just fine, which is perfect. You can see all the variants in watercolor, and some mobs are being a little weird, but I think that's just how the world was on Java too for some reason. Oceans are looking good. The world border transition looks good. You will see there's some weird cut-off trees, but that's just a byproduct of how we created the world. And these oceans look pretty darn endless to me. Let's fly over them. Here we are reaching the edge of these oceans that we've converted, and we are getting new terrain. The terrain that gets converted actually blends perfectly with our existing oceans, so it's not very ugly if you do choose to cross the ocean for some reason, like a cheater. Don't cross the ocean, please just play the world normally, but if you do, your world will still look seamless. Let's do a quick check to make sure our stronghold converted correctly so we can head to the end in this world. We'll just dig down underneath this village, which is the rough area where I placed it. I saw it for a split second there. There we are. We have the stronghold, we have the world, we have the border with all the oceans. I think we hit a home run. Let's check out that nether too. It appears that we have been teleported beneath the nether. That's okay. Let's check out how it's looking. It is looking pretty good, if you ask me. We've got a whole nether here, and for us it just ends. If you did the walls all the way around, you would get a wall instead of just a complete edge, and as you can see, everything past the edge is just an endless nether wastes. How far do we actually have to go for it to be not nether wastes? Probably about 3,000 blocks, honestly, so if you do that in survival, I'm just impressed. You're really supposed to stay inside the limited area with your bedrock wall and everything. Now the last thing we need to check is that the end converted correctly. Even though we never went in the end in our Java world, sometimes the Ender Dragon is mysteriously defeated when you convert the world. This is because of that dragon killed variable that you have to flip. Let's check it out. And it looks like our end still has the dragon. Perfect. So our world has converted 100% correctly. We have all the biomes, all the structures, all of our important things are intact, and you could start a beautiful survival world on this exact same world. So that is the process of creating a console experience world for any of the versions that have an infinite ocean beyond the edge. That leaves one other thing to investigate here, because we still have to talk about the classic option. So the classic world is different in a few key ways. The main way is that it is surrounded by an infinite flat world ocean that you can't actually go to, instead of a real ocean that you can explore. To create this ocean, we've got to load up Java Edition once again. Now we need to create a new world with the super flat world type and hit customize. Hit presets. In the description of this video, there is a long string that you should paste in here to create an ocean flat world. It'll look exactly like it does in the video. You can type it in manually if you want, but just copy it from the description because that's way easier. If you want, you can replace the top layer of stone with gravel by changing stone to 52 and adding a new layer of gravel, which will make it blend more nicely, but this selection of blocks I just chose to match console edition. Once you load up the world, swap into spectator mode and then fly either north or east, 1,000 blocks. Either way, just go in that direction for that many blocks until your coordinate reaches 1,000, and then go all the way around the circle so that your other coordinate also reaches 1,000. What we are doing right now is drawing a border around the area where our world exists in the small world. Continue around the shape, the big square in the ocean that we're making, all the way until you're back at 0, 0. I know this is kind of hard to understand right now, but as soon as I open MCA Selector, you'll see what the point of this is, and then it will all make sense. Once you've finished with that, you can save and quit the game, but don't exit it yet because you will need to use it later. Now open up MCA Selector and locate your new world. My new world is quite boring here. It's just a gigantic ocean. But if you see here, this is the square that we just drew in the ocean. The path we followed was around this line here. So this line is approximately at where the border that we created for the small world is. Open a separate instance of MCA Selector, and open our small world with it. Throw these next to each other so you can see them both at once. Now in your small world, select the area that the world actually is. It is going to be from chunk -4, -68, all the way down to chunk 59, -5. Fill in all this area with orange selection. This is the point of no return. If you want to save your small world as it is right now, copy the world folder to somewhere else, because we are about to delete all the ocean chunks that we just generated. So, inverse your selection and delete. Now we are left with only our base world once again. Select your entire world plus 3 chunks on every direction. So you kind of have a black border around your world. You can do more than 3 chunks, but 3 is all you really need for this process. Now deselect the world from this selection. Now we have 3 extra border blocks selected around our entire world. Export the selection as a CSV. We will call this one flat border. Now import flat border to the big ocean world, and we can see it's drawn a big square in the ocean around the path that we followed. Export these chunks. We'll call them flat edge. Go back to your original small world and import those chunks. Now, go to Tools, Change Fields, and set Force Blend to True. What we're going to do now is reblend the border so that instead of going down to the ugly original oceans that they were before, everything will go to the smooth, super flat version. Remember blend border? We're going to re-import the blend border selection now. And delete. There's one other important thing we do before we initiate our blending, and that is reapply the blend mode data pack. Go back to the data packs folder from the console experience tools and copy blend mode into the world. Now it's time to load up the world and regenerate those border chunks. As you can see, the borders now smoothly blend down to exactly the layer of the stone at the edge of the world instead of whatever oceans they blended to previously. You will notice new chunks generating past the edge of the world with big mountains and everything, but don't worry about those because they're not going to be there very long. fly all the way around the world to regenerate every edge chunk. There we go, we've made a full circuit, so now we can exit the game and complete the final step. Refresh MCA Selector so that it loads in those new blended chunks, and now select all the chunks except for the new ones that have generated outside of the border. This is the same selection as previously that we did, which was 3 chunks out. Export these chunks for one final time. We'll call this Classic Blend. What is this, a Starbucks flavor? Anyway, head back over to the other instance of MCA Selector with our big ocean world and import those chunks. You can deselect those other chunks now because we are officially done with all our selections. So now, our new world, which is that flat world, has a completely flat surrounding ocean, which is exactly what we were going for. Personally, I just like to start anew by selecting only the actual world area that we generated and then inverting and deleting all those possible other ocean chunks because it'll just really take up world space that you might never generate to go all the way out there. So we have officially created our classic-sized world. Let's load it up. Here we are in a brilliant, endless oceaned world that has the terrain in the middle. Now, I do recommend resetting the world border so that we can actually be limited in this world. Set the world border center to 448.0 and negative 576.0, and now set the world border distance to 1024. Boom! Now you've got the giant world border stopping you from actually leaving the world. However, the world border is pretty ugly, so there is a little resource pack I've included in the console experience tools. It's just called resources.zip. Just copy that into the folder for your classic world. Now, that resource pack that hides the world border will apply every single time you load the world. Let's reload the world and watch it happen. You see this right here? This loading screen means it's loading resources. And the world border is now gone, but if we head back to creative mode, we can see that we still can't pass this area because the world border is still actually there. Also, since you set the world border like this, nothing will spawn past the edge. So that's how you do a classic world on Java Edition, almost. There are still a few final steps because we haven't considered the nether. You see, a classic world has a differently scaled nether because traveling 1 block in the nether only travels 3 blocks in the overworld to compensate for the world size. So we've got to fix that. Now there is a data pack I've provided with you here called Classic Nether. Copy that and throw it onto your world. Make sure Not a Nether, Small Biomes, and Blaze Dust are also on there because when we created the new world, the data packs were not copied over. Now this new world doesn't even have a nether because we never imported those chunks, so that's our first job. Go to wherever you exported your nether called Real Nether. This should be the one that has the full border. Copy all the files in here, and go back to your new world, and paste it inside the dim-1 folder. Now we can open that dimension with MCA Selector. Here you can see you have the small-sized nether, but we're going to have to actually move the nether for the classic world so the scaling works correctly. Fortunately, this is by a predetermined vector as long as you're already in the right position for small, because we want the bottom left corner of the nether to be right here at -1, -1. So we can easily get there by applying an 8, -8 transformation. So let's delete everything that's in this quadrant area. Just leave a little bit of nether because if you delete all of it, then MCA Selector can't edit it properly anymore. And now import the same real nether chunks that you had before. Put the offset in of 8, -8, and now we have a correctly positioned classic nether. We can delete those extra chunks now. If your world is for Java, you can now close MCA Selector because you're done. If your world is for Bedrock, you have to repeat the process of exporting your current nether, importing the nether wastes void from console experience tools, and then importing your nether without any offset at the exact same place. This will create the giant void around your nether so that there isn't spawn space being taken up by entities that you can't reach. So now, our classic world should be complete. Let's head to our nether to check it out. Make sure that you've plopped on the Not a Nether data pack so that your nether has a correctly limited size instead of just generating more nether past the bedrock wall. And here we are. We've got our nether in our classic sized world, and if we stand at one corner about, let's teleport ourselves to the overworlds and see where we end up. Alright, we are approximately in the corner of our world. Now let's check the other corner of the nether, right by this big old bastion that we chose to make our other corner marker. And we are now just slightly outside the edge of the world, but thankfully, the world border command in survival would stop your portal from actually generating over there. So with that, the classic world for Java is now complete, and we are ready to convert it to Bedrock as well if we would like. Just like our other Bedrock conversion, we'll have to open the level.dat and change a bunch of details. Let's speed through this. Allow commands, 0. Game type, 0. Time, 0. Was modded, 0. Dragon fight. Previously killed, 0. Dragon killed, 0. Daytime, 0. And delete all the player data. Now save this file, head back to the world folder and delete advancements, data, player data, and stats. Now our world is ready to transfer to Bedrock. Same process as before, open JE2BE, hit Java to Bedrock, locate your world, and start the conversion. Save the world into a custom folder, create a levelname.txt file, and name your world. Open the level.dat for Bedrock, center maps to origin, 0. Check the flat world layers. As you can see, the flat world settings were correctly converted over from Java Edition, which is very nice. Game type 0. Actually, set game type to 1 for now. We're going to fix that later. Set nether scale to 3. This is important for the classic world. Set the bonus chest if you want it. Set start with map enabled to 1. Set random tick speed to 1. Go back up to the top, select level.dat, and click byte. Add show border effect all lowercase no spaces, and set the value to 0. Now save the file, and you are done, my friends. If you are content with a world where you can explore an infinite ocean that has nothing in it. If you want to recreate the border on Bedrock, that's one final step. Import your world to Bedrock Edition. Edit the world once you're inside Bedrock Edition. Make sure to turn on commands, and load up the world. You may notice that you've spawned in the wrong place, and that's because we didn't change the world spawn in this world. That's one thing we gotta fix right away. Pick wherever you want to spawn. I'm not going to bother flying all the way to that same island that we used on Java, so I'll just pick this little plains biome here and set the world spawn. Now it looks like everything converted well, which is good. The ocean seems to be generating properly, but there is a glaring flaw with our ocean, which is that you can fly right past the border. So I have compiled a set of commands that if you run it, eventually sets up a gigantic wall around the entire area. So here's how you do it. You're definitely going to want to set your game to not full screen for this, because you are going to be copying about 12, 16 or so different commands. That's a lot. These commands will all be in the description of this video, under border block commands for Bedrock Classic. Just run them all in order. Once you have run all 17 commands, yes there are 17 in the end, swap over to Survival and test out your border. If we did it all correctly, which I did, then you'll see you can't swim past this edge anymore. You will still see entities spawning past the edge because unfortunately that's something that I simply cannot fix, but I don't really care. I think it's fine. That is how you create a classic world and a small world, and by extension all of the console experience worlds for both Bedrock and Java Edition. I hope you really enjoyed this video, because it took me absolutely ages to record and make and actually to figure out all this stuff, and especially to make it easy on all of you, but this is genuinely as easy as I could have made it. I'm really trying over here. If you don't want to deal with this hassle, of course, just play the console experience worlds yourself, but now you can set it up with any type of terrain. You can set it up with an amplified world if you want. You could set it up with a large biomes world or a tiny biomes world. You could create your own data packs. You could do whatever. Have fun, enjoy console experience, but for now, I do want to tell you all, thanks for watching, and I will see you later.